afternoon. This is Leroy Cooper, Negro baseball curator, historian, and we're here today giving honor to Jackie Robinson and Matt Robinson, the sons of Pasadena. Mr. Hartfield?
It is such a privilege to participate in this recognition of Jackie and Mac. I actually wrote the speech 9 years ago on the 50th anniversary of Jackie breaking into Major League Baseball. But it's as pertinent today as it was then. And it's such an honor and such a privilege to live long enough to pay this tribute to two real heroes. Not for our race, not for America, but for mankind. I've entitled this The Bittersweet Life of Jack Roosevelt Robinson. It is passing strange that I should be privileged to deliver this tribute to the life and legacy of Jackie Robinson. True, I did know him. I knew him so well that I was certain he was the wrong man to attempt to integrate the national pastime. To set the stage, let me remind you that things were quite different in Jackie's time at UCLA. USC had had no colored football players since Howard Jones became their coach some 10 years earlier. No Negro could stay overnight in Westwood, on campus or off campus, unless they were a maid, a butler, or a chauffeur. Mr. Jarvis had applied a restrictive covenant on the entire subdivision before the state acquired the land for the southern branch of the University of California. UCLA referred to Kenny Washington and Woodrow Strode as the Gold Dust Twins, and no one took any exception. UCLA was so proud of Kenny that the students paraphrased the words of a very popular song, "Oh Johnny," with this last verse: "Oh Kenny, please show us how to win the game today. You're not handsome, but boy, look at Smith at Dear Troy. So go Kenny, go Kenny, go." The reference was to Harry Blackjack Smith, a great interior lineman who looked and played like a bulldog. He was so homely that Mom's Mabley would have had a hard time describing him. Again, our response was pride, not offense, not even at the term boy. After all, in Kenny's first game against USC in 1937, he had completed a 60-some yard pass to handsome Harold Hershon. That nickname had been given to Hershon by his fellow students at Manual Arts High School because his prominent nose reminded one more of Jimmy Durante than it did of Rudolph Valentino. In those days, we just called them like we saw them. We were proud that UCLA had 4 of our men on the football team: Kenny Washington, Woody Strode, Ray Bartlett, and John Wynn. In spite of the Washington to Hershon heroics, USC won the game by a score of 17-14. The next year, UCLA scored first on USC with a touchdown, but the final score was 42-7 in favor of USC. Up to that time, UCLA had never beaten USC in a football game. So when the Pasadena phenom Jackie Robinson joined Kenny and Strode in 1939, we were certain that our day had arrived. After all, we had a secret weapon in that Kenny was knock-kneed and Jackie was pigeon-toed, both facts contributing to the difficulty of opposing players making a successful tackle. Sure enough, in the 1939 game, the only one in which both Kenny and Jackie played, UCLA failed to score, but UCLA failed to win. The game ended in a 0-0 tie, which sent USC to the Rose Bowl and UCLA to Hawaii. Due to his transfer from junior college, Jackie only had 2 years of eligibility at UCLA. He managed in those 2 years to become UCLA's first four-sport letterman by lettering in football, basketball, baseball, and track, even though the latter two were played in the same season. In basketball, he was the high point man for the Pacific Coast League in both of his seasons, even though he had never beaten a game against USC. In track, he had beaten his brother Mac's interscholastic record of 25 feet 1/2 inch in the broad jump, after which he changed to his baseball uniform and helped his team to the conference championship. Now, just in case you're not aware, that was the same Mac Robinson who won the silver medal in the 200-meter dash behind Jesse Owens in the Berlin Olympics of 1936. Jackie was used to being a four-letterman. He had accomplished the same remarkable feat at both John Muir High School and at Pasadena Junior College. There was no doubt about Jackie's athletic ability to play Major League Baseball. It was his temper which concerned me. Not even a military court-martial, nor the threat of lynching, had been enough to cause him to back down from what he perceived to be his due. And this was the man that Branch Rickey was asking to hold his temper for 3 full years, no matter what was said or done to him. Poor Jackie only had 2 cheeks, and he wasn't used to turning either one of them. His response to Mr. Rickey was, quote, "Mr. Rickey, are you looking for a Negro who is afraid to fight back?" Close quote. To which Mr. Rickey replied, "Robinson, I'm looking for a ball player with guts enough not to fight back." This role might have been easier for a Roy Campanella or an Ernie Banks, but it was a high hurdle indeed for a Bob Gibson, a Bill Russell, or even my former son-in-law, Doc Ellis. That Jackie made and kept the promise for a full 2 years is a greater feat than all of his other accomplishments put together. And I am happy to admit that he proved me to be wrong. He kept his promise in spite of the most unspeakable provocations, and I feel certain that doing so shortened his life. I still remember, and I will never forget, the last time I saw Jackie. It was at an old-timers game at Dodger Stadium. Diabetes had begun to ravage his body. A fan from a few rows up called to Jackie to autograph the ball that he tossed to the former most valuable player, and it hit Jackie in the head. When he was finally allowed to be himself, and the press and even some civil rights leaders criticized him for his militancy, I was all the more proud of him for having bottled it up in fulfillment of his promise. Many years later, in comparing himself with Dr. Martin Luther King, Jackie said, quote, "As much as I loved him, I never would have made a good soldier in Martin's army. My reflexes aren't conditioned to accept nonviolence in the face of violence-provoking attacks. My immediate instinct, under the threat of physical attack to me or to those I love, is instant defense and total retaliation." Can you imagine the stress on such a personality from holding that instinct at bay for 2 whole years? We as a people must learn more and criticize less as we study the differing styles of those who have paved the way for we who have been privileged to see 2006. There is more work to be done, for sure. But since racism and discrimination are calculated to avoid detection, we need every possible weapon in our arsenal. There are times to be like the real Jackie Robinson, and there are times to be like Roy Campanella or Ernie Banks. There are times to be like Martin and times to be like Malcolm. There are times to be like Booker T and times to be like W.E.B. I have never heard it better expressed than by the poet Dudley Randall. It seems to me, said Booker T, it takes a mighty lot of cheek to study chemistry and Greek when Mr. Charlie needs a hand to hold the cotton on the land. And when Miss Ann looks for a cook, why stick your nose inside a brook? I don't agree, said W.E.B. If I should have the drive to study chemistry or Greek, I'll do it. Charles and Miss can look another place for a hand or cook. Some men rejoice in skill of hand, and some in cultivating land. But there are others who maintain the right to cultivate the brain. It seems to me, said Booker T, that all you folks have missed the boat, who shout about the right to vote and spend vain days and sleepless nights in uproar over civil rights. Just keep your mouth shut. Do not grouse, but work and save and buy a house. I don't agree, said W.E.B. For what can property avail if dignity and justice fail? If you won't help to make the laws, they'll steal your house with trumped-up claws. A rope's as tight, a fire's as hot, no matter how much cash you got. Walk soft and try your little plan, but as for me, I'll be a man. It seems to me, said Booker T, I don't agree, said W.E.B. After 2 years, Mr. Rickey realized the toil that the restraint was taking on Jackie. He told Jackie that he was free to be himself. Once released from his pledge, Jackie took on all comers, on the field and off, opposing players, the press, Barry Goldwater, Bill Buckley, Malcolm X, Louis Michaud, and yes, Dr. Martin Luther King, Roy Wilkins, and Paul Robeson. Jackie achieved a great deal of acclaim during his shortened lifetime. Rookie of the Year, Most Valuable Player, a World Series ring, Baseball Hall of Fame, Vice President of Chuck Full of Nuts, Chairman of the NAACP Freedom Fund Drive, membership on the NAACP National Board, the NAACP Spring Arm Medal, an honorary doctorate from Harvard University, membership on the board of the Freedom Bank, and special assistant to New York's Governor Rockefeller for Community Affairs. How then was it that he entitled his autobiography, quote, I never had it made? The answer can be found on page 88 of that autobiography, where he explains, I'm grateful for all of the breaks and honors that I've had, but I always believe I won't have it made until the humblest black kid in the most remote backwoods of America has it made. A team player to the end. Going 4 for 4 is not enough for a team player unless his team wins the game. We owe it to the memory of Jackie Robinson to pray and work for the day in which he could believe that he had it made.
Don't move. Stay just like that for a minute.
When I first read that poem, Booker T and W.E.B., it touched me. It was easy for me to memorize it because it's the way I look at things now. I recited it when I retired from teaching, and I told all of my students, most of whom were black, I was in the Black Studies Department at Cal State Long Beach, and I told my 5 children, one of whom is 60 years old now, and I tell all the minority firefighters, including the women, learn when to be Booker T and when to be W.E.B. We need both.
Well, it's really an honor to be here today, being a former firefighter myself and a participator in the Negro Baseball League's history. This is really an honor to have met you some years ago, and we had that opportunity to go to Dodger Stadium for the unveiling of the Baseball Immortal Museum. So tell us a little bit more about some of the positions that you hold at this time.
Well, I've been on pension for 45 years and 9 months and counting. Thanks to Tom Bradley becoming mayor, I became a city commissioner, the Civil Service Commission. I'm presently a member of the board of directors of the Retired Fire and Police Association. Not our association, the big one. And I've lived long enough to see more than 100 black captains in LA City Fire Department and 15 black chiefs. In 1931, William E. Hall, who had come on the job in 1909, passed the battalion chiefs list, and they told him, "Hall, it's a shame you're not a white man. We have no place nor plan for a colored chief." Now, in defense of the department, it took 4 companies to make a battalion, and at that time we only had that one double house at 30s, engine and truck. And it was unthinkable in that time, 1931, to have a black battalion chief over white captains. So he retired on December 31st, 1931. The Lord has blessed me to live long enough to see 15 black chiefs in LA City Fire Department, including 2 deputy chiefs and 2 assistant chiefs. My last 17 years on the job, no black could make captain, because all our captain spots were full. The Lord has blessed me to live long enough to see over 100 black captains, 60 of whom are on the job now, along with 13 black chiefs. Everything that I thought was a handicap has turned out to be a blessing. It was because I couldn't promote that I chose to go back to school. I feel certain that if I could have even promoted to driver, I never would have taken advantage of the GI Bill and gone back to school. And in the long run, it enabled me to come up with 3 pensions instead of just 1.
Mac and Jackie Robinson were like the Venus and Serena of their time. So tell us a little bit about Jackie and Mac.
Jackie wasn't the only one that had a temper. Mac had a temper too. In fact, it was because he became angry at Oregon or Oregon State, whichever one he was at, that Jackie ended up at UCLA. Mac forbade him to go to Oregon. And so we were lucky enough to get Jackie. About a year ago, the Los Angeles City Firemen the department celebrated its 100th black captain. My last 17 years on the job, no black could make captain. I was tickled to death. But one of the younger men, who is more militant than I, "That's nothing to celebrate. We've been here 110 years. I said, "Yes, that may be true. But when I retired, there had only been 14 in history. In the next 40 years, you've gotten 86 more, plus all those chiefs. I'd rather celebrate the glass being half full than complain that it's half empty." To understand why I look at things a little differently than the younger men on the job, when I graduated from Manual Arts High School in 1936, I had never seen a black teacher. Not only never had one, I had never seen one. I had heard of 2, but I hadn't seen them. There had never been a black judge. There had never been a black councilman. There had never been a black supervisor. There had never been a black member of the Supreme Court. That's why, even though things aren't perfect yet, I choose to look at the glass half full rather than half empty.
You know, that's really funny because, my coming on to the fire department in the 1970s, I worked with Inglewood Fire Department for 1 full year thinking that I was the only and the first black fireman for the city of Inglewood. And 1 year later, I find out that there was another fireman, Al Williams, that was black, but he looked white. First of all, we'd like to thank Mr. Arnett Hartsfield for being here today and giving his experiences with the Jackie Robinson and Mac Robinson brothers. Okay, we dedicate this show to the affectionate love of Jackie and Rachel Robinson. This show would not be complete without mentioning our famous champion, Mr. John Buck O'Neill. I had the honor of spending several occasions with him this year. Most of all, Cooperstown about 6 weeks ago. We spent a wonderful 5 days together, and he is truly a champion and will be missed. Buck O'Neill is really known for being a famous scout, coach, and manager for Major League Baseball. Coming out of the Negro Leagues, he was known for signing several top ball players such as Willie Mays, Lou Johnson, Ernie Banks into contracts with the proper teams. He would select players by their personalities and the needs for teams and supply them to the right people. And even to this day, he is heralded as the spokesman or the poster child for the Negro Leagues. Thank you. This is truly an honor to be here today to do this show to represent the two brothers of Sons of Pasadena. And again, it was really wonderful to spend time today with my friend Arnett Hartsfield, who is living history at 87 years old, to be here to share this story today of Jackie and Mac Robinson. This is Leroy Cooper, Black historian of the Negro Baseball League and curator of the Negro Leagues, signing off here in Pasadena. Thank you.